Your grief community is so essential for healing. Not that you're ever healed from grief, I must admit, this is a permanent relationship. And man, there are days when I am so sick of grief. It's just like, you know what, you over there and leave me the fuck alone. I can't do this today with you. And it's funny because when I first lost Z, I waited a year before I sold everything at the advice of friends who were like, okay, just chill out, Zen Buddha for a year and see how you feel in that amount of time. And I still felt like running. I was like, you know what? I'm out of here. I can't take this. Sold the house that I shared with my son and sold everything, actually, and ended up in a really unfamiliar place. But as the journey went from one coast to another coast, I couldn't escape grief. It was like in the airport, in the bathroom stall. It was everywhere I went. Grief is just always there. And man, it can be exhausting. But the release that you get within your grief community or a grief community, your relationships, your friendships, is monumental for allowing grief to not be so exhausting and getting it out. It's, it is, it's, I was at this grief group that I attend every once in a while with these incredibly beautiful women who it is just watching them and their pain. It's exhausting. I hurt for them, and I can't quite get my head around why us. Why are we in these situations of such great loss of losing children? And I had a reading a million years ago, it seems, with an Akashic record reader, and I had asked her. And Akashic records are basically records that keep track of thought and soul history, all of the happenings of the human experience across all of time. And so I was like, okay, when you have a reading, you have to bring questions to the reader. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go straight to the point. I'm going to get right in there. I'm going to get there. And I was like, okay, what's the purpose of my life? Like, why am I here? And she said, oh, you are here to, one, explore what it's like to be a tortured artist, and two, to define duality and tear it apart. That's what she told me. And so I feel like there is definitely bigger purpose to loss and to grief. There definitely is. But we don't remember it. Like, we don't come in with our higher perspectives, and getting into such complicated situations, whether it's an abusive childhood or the loss of a parent early or sibling or friend. And as you age and get into your earth walk, loss is inevitable. So jumping into what do you do with that, and grabbing for higher perspective, at least in my grief, is my reaction. Is like, okay, I need immediately now higher perspective to get my head around this because it's too big for my human self. And when you start tapping into higher perspective, one, you don't get there entirely, because that's not the point, I guess, of being here. I guess a torture is apparently involved. But having that grief community and that human community is so important. And I looked into my life, like into my friendships and into my relationships. And when I do look into them, I go, my God, everybody is grieving. Like my friends Yael and Vaz in the desert, they're totally grieving. Vaz suddenly lost his brother and his father, and Yael, her mother and her father. And I look at everybody in my community, and there is great loss. And sharing your grief is an opportunity to release it and to also get out of your own space and your own way and feel compassion for another. And so, higher perspective, defining duality and tearing it apart. Like, body, soul, good, evil? Or is the task to define that within myself, and within my grief, like there's dark and light, right? And pain and love, which is really ultimately, it's all connected. And maybe tearing apart duality is the concept of we are one. It's all one. And so taking these separate parts and going, woof, here we are, man. This is togetherness. We are one, and you are a body and a soul versus the separate parts of it. I don't know. I'm still working on that, the whole idea of duality. But I am getting very clear as to what it is like to be a tortured artist. That is for sure, because honestly, that's what grief feels like, torture. And it's like going back to me running. I'm such a runner. I'm like, okay, you know what? I don't like you. I'm out of here. I'm running. You know what? I didn't like the way you said that. I'm breaking up with you. I'm very quick to just go. And I think it's, a reaction to a rough beginning, or a rough previous lifetime where it's like, nope, you're not going to get me this time. Not a chance. I will not fall into like that victim space or that I'm hurt space. And so I run, and it's worked a lot this lifetime, to be fair. I've cleared the air of toxic people quickly and stuff like that, but it does not work in grief, because grief is a relationship that is part of your individual duality within your soul and your body and your spirit and your connection. And I am working so deeply on how do I relieve the trap of grief? Is it even a trap? Because it kind of does feel like a trap. Because if I can get my head around the thought, am I powerful enough, or is the thought does it even exist yet, where I can get around that grief, not around it, like avoiding it. Like I'm very capable of jumping into my grief and wrestling with it and going head to head with it and going, you know what, fuck you, you aren't taking me down today. Or sometimes, okay, you win, man, you win, I am down. But the relationship that I'm developing, the relationships that I'm developing here, and the new relationship with my kid on the other side, and my dad on the other side, and friends on the other side, but specifically jumping into the relationship I have with my son on the other side, it's like he's still there. He's there. So what am I grieving? I'm grieving the loss of his humanness. But if I'm busy grieving his human, or the loss of his humanness and body, am I getting in my own way to receive the new Rosino, the new Z, my new son on the other side, or the previous son, or the purity of just being one on the other side? It's very confusing, but grief community is important. And recognizing that the reach into the unknown is a really big part of the unraveling and the reconnection to the concept of one, or tearing apart the concept of duality. I am looking forward to breaking up with grief at some point, and I am going to get it done. I had, and I know this is just like a little footnote, but I had my book editor, who I've written a book. It's not published. Apparently, I need to keep going round and round and round because I'm not very good grammatically, or I'm getting better. No, the book is cool. See, love self-love. Practice that. But he had written me about one of the characters, which is kind of, it's a memoir, so I'm sort of a character. I am a character in the book, and that character loves life, is a life lover. And, since my loss, it's hard to love life. It's become a full-time job, because grief kind of does that to you, because you're either reaching for a happier place, trying to survive a day, or getting your ass kicked completely. So the idea of the concept of duality and, the dark and light, or happy, sad, whatever it is, like I am so determined to love life while I am still Valarie, and be able to take my grief and my joy and be able to create a oneness in them so that I just am. Here I am. I am. I just am. Here I am. I was, I am, and I will be.